from News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DePoint.
And we welcome you in on this Friday. It's been a great week of shows, and we are so glad to have you with us today. D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier was here earlier in the week, as you may know, for an exclusive extended one-on-one interview about the city's response to the attacks in Paris. She told us that MPD began to respond immediately. Some of their tactics we in the public will notice, the chief said, others we will not. Jack Evans is the longest-serving member of the D.C. Council. He represents the District of Columbia on the Metro Board, and he joins us now. Welcome back. Good to see you. Good to have you. Talk with us, if you can, to the extent that you can, about the steps that Metro is taking to keep commuters and visitors to the nation's capital region safe, as we're reminded of what's at stake and of the extent to which there are people out there who really want to harm others.
Yeah, well, we certainly, like the rest of the country, have stepped up our security on Metro. And it's an interesting dynamic because we always want Metro to be free-flowing so that you can easily get on, easily get off, get to where you're going. But at the same time, we want to make sure that people are safe. And so we have more patrols. You'll see more dogs in the system, more evidence of police presence. Our surveillance, which we approved last year, we're really, really glad we did that because we have cameras now everywhere that we can see what's going on. Random checks of bags. You know, we don't check bags on a regular basis, but we do now a little randomly. And just a general uptick of awareness going on in the system. I think the system is very safe. I think the city's very safe. We're really good at this. And so just a heightened awareness, I think, is very important.
Chief Lanier, talking about her beat, if you will, the nation's capital, was careful to say that some of the things that are happening as the result of Paris we will notice and others we won't. Right. Is it basically the same for Metro? Are there things of an undercover nature, of a plainclothes nature?
That's going on as well, yeah. So it's a little bit of both, just as the chief said, just to make sure that we feel the system is safe and secure.
Have you had the opportunity to talk with Chief Lanier about keeping the District of Columbia safe?
Just briefly, when we were in China, we had a conversation, the mayor did, with the chief when I was there, just about our heightened security and just making sure the city's safe. Again, I come back to this, Bruce. We are on alert all the time. We are the nation's capital, have been for many years, on alert about any kind of terrorist threat. So I think we're really good at it. And so it's just stepping up our profile is, I think, what the chief and everyone else are doing.
Is there anything you'd like to see that you're not seeing, or are there concerns? I mean, are there things that beyond the obvious that keep you up at night?
Not really. No, I think, again, we're good at this. We've done it for a long time. And it's the balance that I mentioned between having a free-flowing society, a society where people don't feel they're under like a police presence, but at the same time to make sure that people feel safe.
It's hard to gauge. You know, Washington, D.C. was referenced by name in one of those videos. Right. But operationally, it's tough to gauge. We pray that nothing happens. It's tough to gauge the extent to which something could be in the offing. Do you have a gut feel for that, or how do you approach that in your own mind?
You know, I don't. I don't have a gut feeling for it, but I also don't let it affect me. I don't go around, even in today's world, thinking, oh my God, something could happen. It's really kind of in the back of my mind, out of sight, out of mind. And because, again, I really believe we are doing all we can. The random act of violence that occurs, maybe there's not a lot we can do about that. But hopefully the United States, Washington, D.C. are good at what we do. And I think there is also we react very strongly when people do attack us. And maybe that element is out there as well.
Paul Weidefeld will soon take over as Metro's new general manager.
Yes.
How much opportunity did you have to interact with him personally? How much were you involved in the research, if you will, into his background and the skill set, the temperament that he brings? Ultimately, why was he chosen?
Yes, well, I was very involved because what we did is set up the executive committee, of which I'm a member of, as well as Mort Downey, Kathy Hudgens, and Michael Goldman, one from each of the jurisdictions, who did the interviewing process. Again, the interview back in January that didn't work out, started the process over. The four of us really focused on this. Started out with 15 people, narrowed it down to 4, and then narrowed it down to 2, of which Paul was one of the 2, and then went forward. And then, as you know, the first person we selected dropped out, and then Paul was our other choice. I don't want to say second choice. He was our other choice because they were both very good. And he brings to the table a lot of experience in the region, having run the Maryland transportation system, BWI, and really understands the finances. So from my perspective, I was looking at a person who is really good on the finances and really good on operations and safety. And I think Paul brings both of those qualities to the table.
What's job one for him? If you were taking the job, what would job one be for you?
I think that at Metro, what we really need to do is instill in our employees a real sense of urgency and a sense of pride. And I think that's something that has slipped at Metro because of, the criticism it's been under and the lack of leadership. So if I were Paul, the first thing I'd do is sit down with the employees, explain to them how much he values them, and that we really need to step up our game. And that's number one. Safety. Doing a completed evaluation of where are we, what do we need to do. Operations, reliability. The thing I hear most, Bruce, about Metro is people are frustrated. They get on the train and they can't get to work on time. And it's happening not 1 day a week, but 4 days a week. How do we change that reliability? And so, and just the little things that drive people crazy. And I mentioned it on your show. Why are the trains still like? Why are they still like that? Why do the escalators not work? Why does it look dirty in the system? These are things that are easy to clean up. When I was in China, I had the opportunity to ride on the Shanghai subway system. Started in 1970s, just like ours. Much larger. They're building 10 more lines. Spotless. Everything works. Advertising everywhere. And I mentioned this at the board meeting yesterday. Let's take a look at what they're doing over there. And I recognize it's a communist country run very differently. But let's take a look at it. Maybe we can learn some lessons about how to make our system a better system.
And in terms of some of the fundamental financial issues that have brought us to the place that we're in terms of...
It's the other part of this.
How does that awareness remain? Because while it's tempting to blame the board or the prior GM for all the frustrations and the shortcomings of Metro that we're experiencing today and that we've been experiencing for a while, probably there's very broad shared responsibility in terms of underinvestment. So how do we avoid a situation where we say, new guy's here, it's all on him, he's the white knight on the horse, what have you, and we can just forget about all the things that are really the fundamental causes of our challenge.
And we have to do exactly the opposite. First of all, get the finances. We've got to get the audit done. And hopefully that'll be done by the end of December without going into the minutiae of this. We've got to get the audit done. We've got to get the finances in order. And then secondly is to sell the system in the region. I have said on your show, say it again, this system, in order to have the system we all want, is going to take an investment of $25 billion over the next 10 years. Now, if we don't want to do that, I can run the system we have, the unreliable, somewhat safe, unclean system. I can run that system with what I got. But I need that extra money if I'm going to take this system to the next level. And we just have to sell that to the public and, more importantly, to the other elected officials.
You mentioned the trip to China. The mayor was there. You accompanied the mayor on her trip to China.
Yes.
What value do trips like that have? I'm not suggesting they don't, but I'll bet a lot of people in the public say, okay, it's nice, it's a feel good, you get to see some places you wouldn't otherwise see, but I don't know how much the trip cost, whether it was a little or a lot. What does the city get out of something like this?
And it's very important for a number of reasons. But just let's start with this. China sends more tourists to the District of Columbia, Washington, than any other country. And they expect to double that number of people in the next 5 years. So it's important, number one of the groups we met with is the travel agencies in China that employ 30,000 people. What can we be doing better? The idea of having a direct flight from Shanghai to Washington, we have one from Beijing to Washington now, was thoroughly discussed about how this will help our number one industry, tourism. Number two, China has a lot of money to invest. And we have a lot of projects that need investment. So we met with a number of individuals, the richest man in Asia who runs Wanda, for one of them, to see what they're looking for and how to invest. And we had a number of business people with us who have projects that they want to invest in. So it's just a whole multifaceted approach that is critical. And you had, on the government side, in addition to the mayor, our head of economic development, Brian Kenner, chief of staff, John Falchecchio, myself, Tony Williams, who is really, really good at this stuff, and Jeff DeWitt, who's our CFO. That's the team.
And was Jim Denninger the head of the board?
Jim Denninger, Board of Trade, Harry Wingo from Chamber of Commerce, and then a number of business leaders who really are able to present the case for the district and the region.
Did you get a feel for why the district is such a exciting tourist opportunity for Chinese people?
Because people worldwide are fascinated with the District of Columbia and with the United States, but particularly in China. And everyone we talk to wants to come to Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful city, the image they have of it, the power that it exerts. And so I have to tell you, it just has an enormous potential for us.
While the mayor was abroad, the decision was made to pull the plug on Fresh PAC.
Yes.
A super PAC that was soliciting large donations for a political action committee that would have helped elect, presumably, people who share the mayor's vision for the District of Columbia in the 2016 elections. She called it a distraction. The notion of this had been criticized on the editorial pages and elsewhere.
Yes.
What's your take on whether this was typical politics and people need to grow up and understand that this is what big city mayors are going to do, or did it cross the line and become something problematic?
I say more the former than the latter, but I agree with the mayor's decision to close it because it was becoming an enormous distraction. But what I didn't read the next day were the editorials in the Post and other papers about Terry McAuliffe's PAC, or Larry Hogan's PAC, or people on the Hill who all have PACs and spend money doing exactly what the mayor was doing. Why is it that the District of Columbia is always criticized for doing things like this, but the rest of the region is able to get away with it? Now, I agree with the mayor. She was getting clobbered on it unfairly, but nonetheless getting clobbered. I mean, because all the other people have them and don't get criticized.
But if soliciting contributions from people who have business or want business with the city creates an image and perhaps actual problem, why not say, I don't care if other people are jumping, you know, the old thing about your parents say if your friends are jumping off the bridge, would you do it too?
And that's why she did what she did, you know, because of the criticism she was getting.
Was it flawed from the outset? Was it kind of flawed from the outset?
Well, again, I think what the mayor was doing is looking what every other big city mayor does and what every other politician in the region does and have a PAC. And I think that, again, we are held to a higher standard in the District of Columbia and have to recognize that. And so, again, I think she did the right thing, and it wasn't her supporters in getting out of it. But I just raised that issue, Bruce. Where are the editorials and the condemnation of the other officials who do this?
We're way over on time, so I don't have a lot of opportunity to ask you about the multi-part Washington Post survey that's been coming out a day at a time. We're going to talk about it on more next week with Bob McCartney, the Washington Post. But a couple of the big headlines, I need really quick your thoughts if you want to provide them. Crime is now the #1 concern. It's overtaken other issues, and development is now viewed in a kind of a net negative way. It's always been part blessing, part problem. It feels like there's been some tipping, if you will, from net positive to net negative. I may be oversimplifying.
On the crime, the homicide rate spiked this summer, as you know, up 50-some%, and I can understand why people are very concerned. And even the feeling of somewhat unsafeness when you walk down the streets, robberies, etc. Police chief will point out crime is down and statistically, but people are feeling a little unsafe. So it doesn't surprise me that that jumped up so high. But we're addressing it, and I think we're going to be all right in that area. Development is being criticized because there's this fear, of course, as development occurs, that people who have been in the city are being driven out or are not able to afford to stay here anymore. And again, it's an issue we're trying to address. Development is critical for our city, though.
D.C. Councilman and Metro Board Member Jack Evans,
Thanks,
Democrat from Ward 2. Always great having you here. Have a great weekend, great holiday.
You too.
Good to see you.
Look forward to
see you again soon. When we return, should the U.S. deploy troops to Syria? We'll talk with reporter Tim Alberta after this.